So the idea of provenance is simple enough. We want to know where our data came from. We want to know how it was collected. We want to know what's happened to it since. I mean, the question of where data comes from is pretty self-evidently important. Suppose I'm doing political research and I want to know what Americans think about a political topic. And suppose the way I decide to go about gathering that data is that I start calling people in my state, calling people in Nebraska, and doing phone calls. Well, Nebraska is a red state. If that's where my data is coming from, I'm going to find out what a predominantly conservative body thinks of the issue at hand. So knowing where the data comes from is important if we want to reassure ourselves or reassure our target audience that the data is reliable and unbiased. How the data is collected, same thing. I mean, knowing how your data is collected will help you attempt to determine biases in the data. For example, if you are using voluntary surveys, then you're only getting data from people who care enough about a topic to fill in the survey. So if 10% of the population feels strongly one way and 10% feels strongly the other and 80% don't care, then voluntary surveys are going to get you a lot of that 20% that has strong opinions and not a lot of the 80% that don't. And that's a problem because the 80% that don't are a sizable majority. So voluntary surveys risks creating very biased data. I'm not going to talk about this in depth in this course. We do have classes, not in the data analytics minor, but in the applied statistics minor that you can take if you want to know more about that. More relevant to this course, and the thing that we'll spend the most time on, is the question of what's been done to the data before and during data analysis. It's really important to record this, especially if you're changing the data or deleting elements of the data. So let's go back to an example from a previous video. I have two sections of a course. I want to compare student performance in a test across sections. And let's delete two of the situations and say that we're in the third situation. This 0 and this 0 and this 0 aren't real. The student missed the test for an excused reason. They're going to take the test next week, and these zeros are going to be replaced with something else, with whatever the student gets. So I can look at these course averages and I can say, well, this is clearly painting an inaccurate picture. I mean, because this 0 and this 0 and this 0 aren't real, but they are being included in the average. So I make a decision. I'm going to remove students who have a 0 due to athletic obligations because that 0 is not representative of the student. So I remove this student and I remove this student and I remove this student. And now that I've done this, I look at the means and I make a conclusion. The classes performed about the same. All right, brilliant. But you see that I documented this change I made. And that is necessary because suppose I hadn't documented it, suppose I'm reporting this to, I don't know, to my dean or to a student success committee or to an institutional effectiveness committee. And I say, yeah, it looks like students do about the same across these two sections. And a member of the committee goes into my grade book and looks at the averages and says, what the heck? That's not true at all. These averages are totally different. Are you just lying to us or what? Well, because I have properly documented everything, there's no risk of that happening. I can explain what I did and I can explain why I did it. And the question of how to document changes like this is one we will take up in a later unit when we talk a little about GitHub and change logs.